yogis, I'm Laura. Welcome to our practice for Samana Vayu. We're going to be working on the equalizing force that moves around the center of the body in the digestive system. It helps us to process through things, and it helps us to find balance. So in our practice, we're going to be doing some core work, but core work in terms of all different sides of the muscular structures that connect the upper body with the lower body, the abdominals, the side body, and the lower back, and then also working through some breath patterns that are going to help to stabilize these areas. So thank you so much for joining me. We're going to start out down on the mat, on our back with the knees bent. And this is really the place where I like to start with breath work because we are supported and there isn't much tension on the middle of the body or the back, so we can really concentrate on the movement that's happening without worrying about what the spine is doing so much. So in this supported position, you can even let your knees gently rest against each other. Just focusing on the movement that's happening around your rib cage and around your belly. Gradually taking control of that movement, making it larger and more expansive. When we're working on Samana Vayu, it is strongly associated with the Agni, the internal fire. So the visualization that I like to use is that as you're breathing, as you're inhaling, you are bringing oxygen to that fire. It's burning brighter and stronger. As the Agni becomes stronger and brighter, you get this sense of internal energy that you're using. All the things that you've taken in are being digested well and turned into the fuel that you need. Now we're going to start to emphasize the exhale just a bit more, and what I'll call an active exhale. So I'm going to take my hands and kind of show you the bottom of my rib cage. Sometimes these little points stick out where you can see them, but I want to actually use my abdominal muscles to start to draw those points down and flatten the front of the rib cage when I exhale. I'm going to inhale, allow that to open, and then on my exhale, use the abdominal muscles to draw those points down, trying to flatten the front of the rib cage. And it's a good amount of work for my abdominal muscles. Inhale, expand. Exhale, drawing in, pulling in from the sides, and drawing those bottom ribs down. This is a good exercise to practice to get control of those bottom ribs, making sure that they're not always jutting forward, especially when you're going into arms over the head kind of position. Sometimes the rib cage likes to do this little flaring movement. So that's going to be our next challenge. Take your exhale, draw in with the sides, draw in with the abdominal muscles, get really strong connection to the rib cage and the pelvis, and then take the arms up overhead and see if you can keep the ribs down. And I'll show you what happens if I let go. It goes like that. So then I'm going to draw that back down. And you might not feel like your arms go up overhead as far, and that's totally fine. Okay, let's take the arms back down to the sides. So as the arms come back down to the sides, we're going to stretch the legs out. And we'll start our first movement for working on Samana Vayu, this integrating, digesting force in the center of the body. And that's just raising one leg up, lowering it down, keeping stability in the pelvis. So I know that the muscles connecting my upper body and my lower body are working. What you don't want to see is that as the leg comes up, the pelvis moves forward and back. There's all this wiggling in the center of the body. I'm going to hold this area very still and stable. And making sure that I'm not moving my legs so far that it takes away from the stability in the center of the body. The rib cage and the pelvis stay connected the whole time. Especially paying attention to those bottom ribs, because if this is a new concept to you, if paying attention to this area isn't something that you have worked on before, it can be particularly challenging. So see if you can really work on keeping the control there. We're just using this movement to build up some warmth. Okay. So now I'm going to lift my head up, take a hold of my leg, and the other leg is going to come up as well. So the legs are going to stay off the mat the entire time for this movement. And I'm just going to pull one side in, pull the other side in. Little extra exhale when I tuck the knee in. Couple more like that. Feel that effort and that warmth building in the center of the body. Making that fire, that Agni, stronger. Pull both knees in, tuck, pull everything to center. And then drop. And stretch the arms and the legs open. So you'll notice that we're starting with kind of the classic area of working on the core, the front connection between the rib cage and the pelvis. We're going to do one more movement to really feel that connection here, which is our low boat. And you can take a half version of this, or you can take the full version. So the half is going to be lifting up with the arms and just one leg, or the full version with both legs, and then holding. Lower down, take a break. It's quite a challenging position to hold. But lots of work in the front of the body. Okay, now we're going to roll over onto the side. And first, starting out with a balancing movement that I really like. We're just side-lying tree. We're going to start with the body completely stacked on the side, and just being here is challenging to balance. So you can take your fingers and rest that on the mat, find your stability, and then the top leg is going to come up like you were coming into tree. Good, and then holding with the center, take your arm up. You might feel like you're going to wobble forward and back, and that's normal. You might fall over, and that's okay too. You just come back. Don't rush as you find your way back into the pose. Balancing those forces to the front and the back of the body. You can take your arm down, stack your leg, and then we're going to lift up onto the side and bend the knee. So one of my absolute favorite poses for really integrating all the aspects of the core is the side plank, the forearm side plank. So we stack the lower body joints, we get the shoulder lined up right over the top of the elbow, and then we're going to come up onto the knees. Try to line the head up with the rest of the spine so that the neck is straight. Open the top arm up, and then maybe open the top leg. You're constantly pulling pressure out of the bottom of the body, out of the bottom shoulder, so that you don't sag and collapse. And then steadying the breath there. Lower the leg, lower the arm, and then rolling over onto your belly. Okay, so we're going around like a rotisserie chicken. Now we're going to work on the back of our core by lifting the arms, lifting from the upper back. There's lots of effort really up behind my shoulder blades is where I'm trying to find the lift. And then the legs come up. And how high you come up is going to depend on what your lower back feels like. You know if your lower back is sensitive, so take precaution if it is. Then I'm just working my breath against that pressure of the floor. Makes the inhale more challenging. I have to pull the air in against that pressure, but then the exhale is a little easier. And then exhale and lower that down. So we're going to go right over to the other side, starting with our balancing tree, and this time I'll have my back to you so you can see the other side. Once you feel like everything is pretty straight and stacked, open the top knee into your tree pose. If you want to keep the right fingertips out in front of you for support, you can, if you feel like this is really wobbly. But if you feel steady, take the arm up overhead just like you would normally do in tree if your arms are apart or if you bring your hands together. And then feel that process of the body making adjustments. You lean forward, you lean back, there's that little wobbling action, and that is a wonderful thing. Release your top arm, release your leg, and then we'll come up onto the shoulder for our forearm plank, our side forearm plank. Okay, stack the lower body joints. Make sure that your elbow is right underneath your shoulder. A lot of people have a tendency to put it out too far, and then that can make the shoulder a little bit cranky. So we come up, find your straight line through the center. Arm comes up, and maybe the leg comes up. Lower your leg and your arm. Come back down onto the mat. We're going to come onto the belly one more time. Working the back of the body. So arms come back, lifting from the upper back. Try to find the spot where it feels the hardest to lift, where you're the weakest. That's the place where you need the work, not where it's easiest to lift. And then take the legs up. Steady your breath, work against the pressure of the floor. And then exhale and release down. So now we're going to take a little stretch up into that same direction. So we just actively use the muscles in all areas of the core, front, back, and sides. But part of having a strong and healthy core is flexibility as well. So you can come into a Sphinx pose and rest on the forearms if that feels good on your lower back, or if you want to come up farther, you can start to press with your arms. But watch the sensation, watch how it changes as your body changes shape. You can always lower down and take a rest. You don't have to hold the pose as long as I am. And then we'll lower down. Bring the head to rest on the hands. Rock the hips from side to side to release. Rock the feet in and out to soften the hips. And then we're going to come up onto hands and knees and into a seated position. Okay, so I'm going to sit up onto my blanket because we're taking the legs out wide, and it just helps to get right on top of the pelvis to make sure that you're not sagging and sinking down. Sitting up tall. Okay, and then we're going to take the hands together into a steeple position, index fingers out. And we're going around in a really big circle, like you're stirring this giant pot of soup. All of that movement coming from the core. Inhaling as you go forward, exhaling as you come back. Come back up to center, change directions. Noticing if one direction or one part of the movement is more challenging than the others, and then make sure that you're not skipping over that part. So for me, I tend to maybe not go back as far as I could. So when I'm trying to open up this movement, I just have to slow that part down. Really focus on coming all the way back, scooping with the low belly. Good, come back up into center, lengthen through your spine, and then we'll take a walk out front, keeping that length in your spine. Sometimes it's helpful to lift up onto your fingertips, so that reminds you to lift up through the front of the body instead of collapsing and falling into it. Keep space for your breath to move. Take your inhale, walk yourself up, and then slide your legs together. Okay, so for this part, we're going to go forward and back, but similar arm position. We take the steeple pose, and you're reaching forward. Be careful with your lower back. Come back. Now, as you're going forward, if you feel restricted, bend your knees. That'll help with the lower back as well. Inhale, exhale, like you're sawing through a piece of wood. Really work that scoop back, draw in. Moving from the pelvis, moving from the base of the spine. Couple more. Come up to sit, lengthen up through the front of the body, and then we'll walk down into a longer hold in your forward bend. Keeping length through the front. And then gradually, as you soften into it, if you want to fold deeper, you can, as long as your back is okay with that. Take your inhale to walk up. Okay, now I'm just going to turn sideways and move my cushion out of the way. Plant the feet hip distance apart, the hands right underneath the shoulders. And now we're going to use the back of the core again, the forgotten side of the core. So we're going to lift up into reverse table. And I want you to focus on the crease where your leg and your body meet, right here. You're trying to open up that spot by lifting with the muscles in the back of the hip, the glutes, squeezing and lifting from the glutes. And then, if your head feels okay, you can lower that back, but just be careful with your neck, keep that happy. Keep lifting up higher, squeezing the glutes, lift the pelvis, open the front of your hip joint. And then lower that down. You can lengthen the legs out, let yourself fold forward without collapsing. And then we'll move back up. We're going to come into the reverse version of plank, which is such a good strengthener for the posterior chain muscles. Bringing the hands right underneath the shoulders, just like we did for reverse table. And then using the glutes again to lift the pelvis up and open up the front of the hip joint, push down into the heel of the hand, draw the shoulder blades behind the back, and then find the spot where your neck can be open. Feel that work in the back of the body. This is not an area that gets a ton of work, so this is hard. Good, exhale, lower that down. Bring your knees back, fold them into Sukhasana, into comfortable cross-legged, and then we're going to fold forward. And as you fold forward, we'll take a little sway from side to side. From here, let's make our way up and swing the legs around. We're going to move into our lunging portion. So if you like to have cushion underneath the knees, you can put a kneeling pad or your blanket down in the middle of your mat to keep your knees happy. And then we'll come into table right on top of that. Okay, tuck your toes underneath, and we're starting with just a lift into what I like to call a floating table. My shins are parallel to the floor, but the knees are not touching the mat anymore. I'm just resting on the toes and the ball of the foot. I'm holding there, feeling lots of work through my lower belly, the area where it's the hardest to activate for most people. Okay, now I'm lifting with that portion and I'm scooping myself back into downward facing dog. And then feeling the connection between my front ribs and the front of my pelvis. I don't want to let my whole rib cage fall toward the floor, where you see that a lot in yoga pictures. I'm trying to keep some work between the ribs and the front of the pelvis, like we were doing on the floor earlier. Don't let your lower ribs pop forward. Okay, now I'm going to take my right leg and step it up to the top of the mat, lowering the back knee down and rising up. So right here, we take the hands into prayer. And usually when we twist, we take a hold of something, we crank our body around using our arms to pull to get there. But what we're going to do instead is use the strength that we have to see how far we can rotate naturally. So you have your hands together in prayer, and as you exhale, you're going to start to turn and rotate toward the right into your prayer twist. And then we're holding here, working for a few breaths to find the deeper expression of that movement. Every time I exhale, I'm working this back elbow farther back, rotating around the center axis. And then I'm going to release my hand, take it to the outside of my knee, open the right arm back, and then see where I can get to with just a little bit of leverage on my knee. And then I'm going to release the knee, see if I can keep that space that I found, the deepest place that I got to, and then untwist as you inhale back into center. Very nice. Okay, bring your hands down, take that leg back, and lift up into your balancing table. Staying here, working your breath, and feeling that work in the low belly. Scoop back and up from there to find downward facing dog. This time we'll take the left leg, drawing it up, stepping it forward. Back knee lowers to the mat, and you find your way up with the hands at the heart. As you exhale, rotate from the shoulders. This rotation is coming from the upper back. My hips are essentially still facing the front of the mat. I'm working these muscles to make this rotation happen. Every time I exhale, trying to find more space. Okay, now, using the arm on the outside of my knee like we usually do, so that I have that external force to move deeper into that rotation. We're opening up new areas that were tight before, or we didn't have control. And then trying to stay in that space as we release that pressure from the arms. And make your way back into the middle. Good, release the hands. Lift the back knee, take your left leg back. Lower down onto the knees and back into child's pose. Take a small rest there. And then we're going to come up and put the hands right on the sides of the legs to, again, work on that lower part of the belly. So we're going to do what I call rabbit pose. You're going to lift the hips, lift the knees, and there's lots of scooping. Almost like you're hopping like a rabbit. And eventually the idea is that you will lift your feet up as well. Eventually. You can try one foot and the other foot. And one more. Lowering down. Coming down onto the mat. Now as we make our way back down onto the mat, I'm going to have you swing your legs over to the left. My knees are facing to the left. And then I'm going to come down facing toward the mat. This is not a way that we normally take our twist, and you can put your hand there to rest underneath your head. So this might feel like kind of an odd way to twist, but it's good to try different movement patterns. We don't want the body to get used to any one movement pattern and get stuck in a rut. Walk yourself back up to center, and then you're going to swing your legs over to the other side. And come down to twist the opposite way. You may feel like you can stretch your arms out into a T and come flat down. Or you might like having maybe a blanket or your hands there underneath your head for a pillow. Walking yourself back up. So we'll take the legs over to one side into what we call a mermaid pose usually. And then we're going to come over into a side bend. And then drop the other way. So this time the arm is going to come a little farther over. And then you're lifting up with the strength in your side muscles. Don't push with this arm. Use your side to come over. Lengthening the side of the body, and then actively coming up to center to the opposite side. Come back into center. Change your legs over to the opposite side without your hands if you can. It's a little extra challenge to use your strength through the center. And then we'll start that side sequence over here. Back up to center. Take your legs out to the front. So then in this long sit, we're going to focus on the muscles on the sides of the body by not using our arms. You're going to lift your leg, scoot it forward. Lift your other leg, scoot it forward like you're walking your hips forward. And then walking them back. It's a strange movement, and it's not one that we do very often, but we're using the muscles that connect to the top rim of the pelvis on either side. And it's an area that we really need stability when we're walking, when we're shifting our weight from one leg to the other, or when we're doing single leg balances in our yoga practice. This is a great way to wake them up. Especially if you can do this on your sticky mat, then you know you're really lifting your hip up high. Okay, so do a couple rounds of that forward, back, forward, back. Don't use the arms. Nice, and then we'll tip back, draw the legs in, and find your boat. So let's challenge that boat to lower it down and then lift it up. Be careful if you have a sensitive lower back. Good, one more like that. And then we'll lower onto the mat. As you come down, knees come to the chest. And we'll rock. Let the knees come together and the arms open. You're going to rock with a little bit more control this time. We don't have the arms for support. Come into center. This is going to be a much softer version of what we did earlier. The extended leg is resting down on the floor. I'm using my arms to give a good stretch to the bent knee, pulling it in. Let the knees drop down and then fall over to one side. Open the arms. And then if you like, the left hand can reach down toward the left toes if you want to try to hold on to them, get more opening through the front of the hip. Release that foot. Roll the knees over to the other side. You can rest just like that, or if you want to reach down, hold on to your foot. And let that knee relax down to create that opening through the hip. Release your foot, and knees back into center. Let's make the body comfortable for Shavasana, settled, supported, open, and still. Allowing yourself to rest here, soaking in the effects of your practice for as long as you like.